and you can go and check that out. So, jumping into the topic at hand, we're going to have three speakers, myself from Resource Recycling Systems, Natha Dempsey from the Food Service Packaging Institute, and Keith Harrison from Resource Recycling Systems. And just to give you a quick roadmap of where we're going, you're not going to hear all that much from me, but we are talking about recovery solutions for food service packaging, focusing on voluntary market-based solutions. And what we've looked at so far is the recovery landscape and trying to identify what's out there, what areas we're working in, what are our real challenges and obstacles, what's already going on. We've found that the material recovery facility or recycling Murph is going to be a key to this. A lot of the material would need to flow through one of these sorting facilities. So how would that material behave there? We're going to touch on that. A big key is markets. You can't really collect something and not have anywhere to send it. Otherwise, it just ends up in the landfill. And so we really are going to do an honest discussion and exploration of markets. And the big one is barriers, and that's real and perceived barriers. So we're going to touch on those as well, and I'm sure that you guys have some input that you can give us on that. Also, really to start out, we're going to hear from the Food Service Packaging Institute, FPI, and we're going to hear a little bit about the Paper Recovery Alliance and Plastics Recovery Group who are driving all of this work. And we're going to hear about why they're jumping into these efforts. Why are they looking at these voluntary market-based efforts for recovery solution for this material? So with that, I'd really love to turn things over to Natha Dempsey at FPI to lead us through some of those things. Natha?
Sure, Jason. Thank you. My name is Natha Dempsey. I'm Vice President at the Food Service Packaging Institute. For those of you who don't know what the Food Service Packaging Institute is, we are the trade association that represents the suppliers and converters of food service packaging. About 2 years ago, in 2011, we had a group of members come to us and ask us to start looking at recovery options for food service packaging. With that, we founded the Paper Recovery Alliance at the end of 2011 and the Plastics Recovery Group at the beginning of 2012. With that, why are we getting into the recovery scene? Several of our member companies are constantly and always working on recovery options of their own, but one of the things that we found was there's volume in numbers, and critical to recovery is volume. So here are our founding members of the PRA and other members of the PRA. And are members of the PRG, the Plastics Recovery Group.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that background, Natha. That's very helpful and informative. And now we're going to dive a little bit into the real meat of the matter, the research we've done and where we're going with it. And so for that, I'm going to turn things over to Keith Harrison with Resource Recycling Systems. So please jump in and take it away, Keith.
Hi, hello everybody. I think I've been watching who's signing on, and we've got about 70 people out there right now. And I think a lot of you are probably wondering, so what's a packaging group doing in recovery? And I think probably a fair amount of you are here to check and see how legit this operation is. And so, and that's why the whole purpose of this event today is to talk about an initiative driven towards reducing or recovering more material. And so, from the get-go, this project was intended to be solid with a no greenwashing approach. The members that came together, those logos that we saw just a minute ago, wanted to make sure that that any effort that we undertook had concern of the fate of the material, not just getting it into a bin or getting it into a compost pile, but getting it through the full fate of material for a solid recovery project. And this project is now in its second year of work. Last year focusing really on study, data development, marketplace analysis, some test models, we'll learn about that. And now we're rolling into real operation where we begin to see if we can make a difference in recovering more of this food service packaging. So when you start work like this, it's important to always define what are you looking at. So what is food service packaging? It's the stuff that allows you to eat at the restaurant and mostly take it with you. And that's a pretty big spread, and it's a spread of materials. Think about PET, polypropylene, polystyrene, expanded, PLA, paperboard, polycoat, clay coat, corrugated, and a number of shapes and sizes, everything from small portion cups to cups and lids, to straws, forks, lots of sporks, and containers. And what this group really looked at is where do we need to start, and walked away with what Jason pointed out in the beginning, that good starting parts include cups, containers, boxes, and bags. And so defining the materials that are there is an important start of where to go, the materials that can be collected and start to make their way. So after you define it, the next step is definitely figuring out how much of it is out there and where is it going, the generation and dispersal of the material. So what do we know about that? Well, we know the vast majority, about 70%, leaves the store. And so what we begin to think about is that we have all these little pieces of materials, all these cups, these boxes and bags and containers that are walking away from restaurant and eating facilities, both the traditional restaurants that you're thinking about and other food service venues like universities and hospitals, and make their way out into the marketplace. And what was enlightening and encouraging to see is that next step is about 50% of it ends up at the home and business. And what was reassuring about figuring out that about half of it hits the home and business is because then we know we can tap into the existing recovery infrastructure. Then we know that we're able to tap into the composting facilities, like the things you see on the left-hand side of your screen, and then into the larger Murphs-based recovery system. And any effort like this needs to lend solid consideration to volume, how much of it is out there, and really starting with the biggest points of volume, that stuff that hits the Murph, really helps the project to narrow in on how can we begin to address the concerns of food service packaging from the home and from the business. I think it's probably fair to say that if you sign up for a webinar like this, you're thinking in front of store. And many members are really working towards the ultimate goal of getting front of store recycling. So if you finish that beverage, you can recycle it right there as well. But this project felt it was very important to start first where the bulk of the material is, solve the Murph to market problems there, and then back to once we have those established and we've got a good flow of material going, then we can back to the front of store. So if we look at what's being generated, what's being dispersed, then we begin to think about what are our recovery options. I just got to note that the slides are not advancing. Right now, you should see slide number 11, a recovery slide. Hey, Nasa, you have an open line. Do you see slide number 11?
Yes, I can. It's a little slow, but it's coming through.
A little slow, but coming through. I'll try and click before I talk about them. So right now we see what are our recovery options. The group was set that we need to avoid disposal. This is a valuable material, and we need to avoid disposal. So we saw three ends to that: composting, energy recovery, and recycling, that the group really wanted to focus on. We see, even though there are three paths to recovery, those fit into kind of two roads. The composting infrastructure being established for direct interaction with eating venues already, and then energy and recycling tapping into the Murph-based infrastructure. We increasingly see the Murph functioning not just as a step in recycling, but as a marketing agent. And that Murph is primarily marketing to a recycling-based end, but also more and more looking at the potential for a fuel bale or energy recovery option there. And so the FPI group wanted to make sure that we kept those three platforms in mind. So if we know what we have, where it's generated, where it's going, and where we want it to go, then we need to get to work with growing our recovery options. And so the consulting team sat down with the group and really mapped out 4 key areas of work. We need to clearly address the barriers. We need to compound existing work. We need to engage our strategic partners, and we need to respect market demand. Now, since we're consultants and we speak in our own lingo, it's important to know what that really means. Okay, so we get down to, if we really want to get more packaging recycled and composted, access to that energy market there, then what's stopping us? Why isn't this happening now? What about the material keeps it from happening? 2, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. SPI is a small group, and there are lots of other people working here, and we want to make sure that we work with them. We also understand that our recovery infrastructure is a multi-sector one, and so we certainly don't want to go it alone. We want to learn and be an active part of this community. And lastly, no wishful thinking. We needed to be very serious about the difficulty of our material and really understand the challenges that it provides the recovery sectors so that we could begin to address those direct challenges heads on. And you know what? That's a painful process. That's hard to really dig into the pieces of your material and get serious about the opportunities and the barriers that provide them.
Hey, Keith.
Yes, Jason?
I'm just wondering, you say don't go it alone, and you're referring to this community, and I'm going to call you on that. That's a pretty broad term. Who are you talking about?
Well, I think we need to engage our Murphs partners, our end markets. I'm seeing people on the phone. One of my first calls for this was to RISO with NAPCOR on the phone to say, you're dealing with thermoforms, you're the leader in dealing with thermoforms, we're engaging that. How can we, is there an opportunity for us to do it together? But to understand that at no way should we force this into the marketplace, that we need to get the marketplace to react to our material. And what that really comes down to is there's no silver bullet.
Okay, what does that mean? That seems a little vague also. I just want to be sure I get you. I like the Lone Ranger.
Yes, so no silver bullets means that there's no easy solution. It's not a one-time thing. Again, back to the barriers that I was mentioning, Jason, that we need to understand that this multi-sector marketplace has many different needs that need to be addressed, and that although it would be wishful to think that we could teach the children and it would all be settled, or that we could engage in upcoming technology that will make it better, it's not that way. That we need to respect the existing marketplace. How's that?
Fair enough.
All right.
Thank you.
So if we understand there's no silver bullets out there, and we need to engage the marketplace, then we stepped into, okay, how do we engage marketplace pull? We have respect for what moves the material. What do we need to know about the market to engage with it? So let's start with using a PET bottle as a model. What do we learn from a PET bottle? We learn that it has many things that the market reacts to, and we started to see that there were about 5 key areas that the market would react to. But also, we understood that we couldn't just take it one section at a time, that we needed to really have a systems approach to solving this problem. That we couldn't take it city by city, but that we needed to think about, again, this machine that is our marketplace, and that there are all these different cogs and wheels flying, and that we need to be able to address each one of those differently. So we had an opportunity, we understood that there was a system approach that needed to happen, but we did run a couple of test markets to really flesh out what the system might need. And those test markets were Columbus and Charlotte. And last year we reached out to them and said, we'd like to talk to you about recovering more food service packaging. Why did we settle on these 2 cities? Well, Columbus has a good organics connection for composting potential. And Charlotte had a way to kind of test this business or place of work connection with it as well. So we set to work testing our understanding of the material there. I want to give a little scenario of what happened when we sat down with our friends in the Mecklenburg County, Charlotte area. So we met with Community. We met with Mecklenburg County, who runs the MRF and the operations for that. Pulled in the state office to help us with that discussion as well, trying to keep all the major stakeholders at the table. And then we shipped in samples of food service packaging. Plates, domes, cups, cutlery, straws, boxes, bags, everything. And there's a big conference table in the middle of the room, and we laid it all out. We laid out the whole food service packaging array there. And we started the meeting with, okay, let's pull out the low-hanging fruit. And surrounding the table were all these experts, and we quickly got to, there is no low-hanging fruit. After a little easing and back and forth, we did get to pizza boxes. In many cases, pizza boxes can be a potential for a low-hanging fruit. But the rest had a lot of questions, both technical, perceived, and actual, that we needed to address before we could move on. So we walked away from that not discouraged, but encouraged that we had actual understandings of what we need. And what we really established is that in order for a material to enjoy movement through a MRF to market, there are really 5 key thresholds that need to be met. That material needs end markets. And in order for a material to flow, as it says here, that there's multiple end markets, and there's a strong base of marketing options. It's not just a singular one. 2, material value. It costs a lot to sort a material and get it ready. That's $100 to $200 range. So the value of the material needs to be able to offset that. Form and size. Something can be made out of a beautiful grade resin or fiber, but still be the wrong form or size to be able to actively navigate the MRF infrastructure. That's important to know. Quality. We needed to make sure that food contamination would not actively decrease the market value. And capital investment. If you got to build another bunker, that's a barrier. That's a barrier that we'd have to address. So if a material needs to flow through quickly, it needs to meet each of these without any holdbacks. From there, we begin to step in that, okay, getting to understand really all the details about this material. And we understood that before we could go back to those Mecklenburg County and community partners, and the same ones with Rumpke with our Columbus activity, we needed to be able to understand many pieces about ourselves. And those are outlined here. We needed to be able to target the material, boxes, bags, cups, and containers of these types of materials. We needed to be able to explain to them how many tons could they expect in their market area. So we'd aggregate it by population of what could be in this area to be recovered. 3, then let's throw out there what if there was a wildly successful 30% recovery rate out the door, what would that mean by how much of that material might enter a MRF? Now, why 30%? Well, plastic bottles only see about a 28% recovery rate, so 30% is pretty optimistic. But we needed to start somewhere. We can easily tease that down to more realistic 5 or 10% and dial that up the other way too. But we needed to be able to say, this is the material, this is how much is out there, this is how much you could see in your MRF. And then next, that recovery could affect each of your bales in this way. So when this material hits your MRF, here's how it's going to behave. Here's how it could affect the materials going out of your door. And then we begin to see our perceived and actual barriers. What technical solutions, what problematic solutions do we need to overcome on those? But of course, it's not just MRFs. We have different needs from different sectors. And we understand that the way we communicate with our governmental sector about this might be very different than the plastic recycler mill or the MRF or the hauler. And we also, and you had a question?
I did have a question there, Keith. This just couldn't help but jump in as we're talking about MRFs. I want to just take a half a step back. A while ago, you had said something about cost of sortation. Somebody actually called it in with a question that I think is worth clarifying. We're throwing some numbers around. You said $100 to $200 for sortation.
Right.
$100 to $200 per what? Per item? Every fork you sort out is $100, $200 bucks, or talking about per ton?
Per ton. We're at a per ton cost there that is missing there, so that's good. Going back to that slide and looking at a per ton cost. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
So if we understand we need to be able to work with our MRFs, how about that's not the end of the line because they've got to be able to ship it there. So what do we know about our end markets? So what we see here is a map of domestic paper mills that might be possible end markets for this material. These are not vetted and finalized that all these will take food service packaging, not by any means. But these are these are mills that take, as you can see in the key on the left-hand side, materials that might include a food service packaging mix. So here's our starting point to be able to work backwards. We did the same for our plastics reprocessors. Here you see plastics reprocessors in North America accepting tubs and lids. So a tub and lid bale is one geared towards a polyethylene, polypropylene bin, those non-bottle, high-grade containers. There's one facility that's taking 3 through 7s, and my red dot there is a little off-kilter. It should be lined up exactly with the tub and lid one there. That's an Interpex processing facility that takes both, but just an overlay problem there. But we needed to understand who these are. And again, are these vetted as ones that can take a food service packaging blend? No, we haven't gone there yet. We're starting here and moving backwards. Same with composting. What do we know about our domestic composting operators who accept food waste and foiled paper? Here they are as far as what we know, and then able to, again, work backwards. I said at the beginning that the group from day one was concerned about the fate of material. We don't judge success just by getting a food service packaging into the bin. We judge success by long-term recovery options. So when it comes to the recycling side of that, then I think it's fair to bring up what about the export markets right now. So what's going on with the green fence? And early this year we heard about the green fence blocking importation of plastic, low-grade plastic material into China. Then saw that trickle into paper effects too. Is it a green wall, everything is stopped? No. It's a green fence. It's a hurdle and a barrier, and it's causing some really good conversations right now about, will our domestic processing capacity adjust to allow for more domestic processing of rigid non-bottle material when it comes to plastics, and similarly, how do we engage on the paper side? Do we see what is often a very trashy mixed plastic bale being exported? Do we see a movement towards cleaning that up so that it has a higher grade value? Absolutely.
Now, Keith, can I interrupt you again? I guess I just did, so I guess I can. So I have to ask, you mentioned that this green fence is just China. So it's a big world out there. Why are we so worried about just China and their policies?
Well, Jason, before you interrupted, I was about to say, but the good thing about this is to remember that this is an international market, right? And that exportation is not on its own an absolute negative. We always want to support our domestic processing capacity, but just like every other market, it's a global market. So what's up with China? China is the major processor for much of our material, especially on the fiber side. So it becomes the key offshore focus for that initial entry into a global market.
I see. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So what about the elephant in the room? So when we first started on this project, I called one of my friends who works as a Murph man, and I sent him a picture, or I said I started to work on this project. And I wanted to start picking his brain about how do we go about this very complicated task of recovering more food service packaging. And the next day, he sent me a picture from his iPhone of a milky, milkshakey, chocolatey lined cup that he just finished, and the residue was there. And he said, "How do you plan to deal with this?" And I wrote him back, "Thank you." And that's true. Contamination is definitely on the forefront of what we need to consider with this sort of project, and definitely not something we should gloss over or shy away. So where do we begin to start? One of the good things is that this project is initiating its work with the home and business, and so we're dealing with a consumer, with a partner who's used to emptying out their mayonnaise jars, who's used to emptying out their peanut butter containers. And And the hope and expectation, and through talking to some of our initial partnering groups from the work that they had done and exploring new materials that come from the MRF, is that it is possible to expect a similar contamination rate there. But more has to be done. We have to continue to study this and keep an eye on how best to address it, and certainly not gloss over that. So, what are the next steps in this project? Well, you've heard me talk a lot today about a Murphs-based recovery infrastructure. We're really focusing right now on solving the Murph-to-market problem, because from there we can grow. But that doesn't mean it doesn't this project doesn't give a serious nod to composting. FBI is in constant work with our composting friends to help support that infrastructure. And after we tackle the biggest hurdle, the Murph-to-market hurdle, then more emphasis gets to come back on how do we help to drive this growing and hungry food waste and composting market. What are their needs? So what else is next? MRF study. Really understanding what's going on in the MRF. And FBI is one of a number of stakeholders who have partnered together to engage in a serious MRF study of 5 different establishments to see what happens with the fate and behavior of these materials in the MRF. Not just what's already there in the marketplace, but really seeding in a projected blend, using cameras and observers and bale sorts to see how they behave mid-process, how they hit the bale, and what can we learn from there. And that will help us in that diagram I showed you of how do we have a smart conversation with our MRF partners. That will help us to be able to address some of the concerns about this material. But the group needs to continue to build more partners. As I was talking to one of my colleagues on the project, Cody Marshall, he said, you know that there's going to be people out there at this point rolling their eyes thinking, man, this is a hard project. They don't understand my MRF. Well, at the end, I'm going to give you my number, and I hope you call. And we need more. We want more people to help us profile the barriers and the outcomes for this. And that will allow us to better engage in our next steps of really connecting with our MRF and market partners and discussing this problem. We plan to keep you up to date as we go. 2 more webinars on these, and those will be coming next. So in summary, it's a hard job, but somebody's got to do it. And this is an example of industry stepping up voluntarily. FBI has jumped right in. These groups have jumped right into clear understanding of actual barriers and really trying to focus on market-based solutions. Again, we want your insight, like your partnership. And for more information, you can check out FBI's website of FBI.org/stewardship, or you can contact us directly. And we'd be happy to talk to you with that.
Outstanding, and I love that. I like that as an ending, and I do like that as the beginning of talking about some Q&A. Before we dive into the meat of that, there was actually one other clarifying question, and that was concerning the plastics markets. And I believe it was on the plastic recycling map, do you have a representation of which PET facilities accept thermoforms or other PET, such as cups?
Let's see. W and Y. Now, that's definitely on our list to work on, but right now I don't have a clear representation. It's on my to-do list.
Okay, fair enough. And I love the honesty. That's what we're shooting for, so thank you for that. Looks like a follow-up question or a question from the same individual was, you mentioned the phrase fuel bale in your initial remarks referencing Murphs. Would you expand on that concept a bit further? And would that be something that you would investigate further in your future Murph research?
Well, there's many people looking at how best to deal with a fuel bale. And the idea is that we don't want to disrupt the existing recovery markets focused on recycling, but there's value in the material that's out there. So our fuel bale is currently being marketed. I think there are materials that are targeted to end in a fuel bale market right now. But I think it's a growing sector, and things change daily. So we should talk about it. We should continue to
talk about it more. Sure. No, that sounds about right. But for those of us back here in the cheap seats, what is a fuel bale?
A fuel bale is a non-recyclable bale that's intended for a fuel purpose. So if we look at the plastics to oil industry, they need to buy something to turn back into oil. They don't want PET. They don't want vinyl. They need to hit a price point that's lower than, too low to compete with an active polypropylene market. So what do we do with the potential, what might otherwise be residual? Does it have a home in fuel?
Okay. Well, that seems fair enough. Now, you had also mentioned a minute ago that there were going to be, and I think I mentioned at the beginning, there will be a couple more webinars. I don't want to lose that thread. You said they will be coming soon, and I just wanted to let people know that we're looking at doing one diving deeper this summer and another one continuing the conversation even further in the fall. So we're going to space them out by roughly a couple of months each, and we hope that you'll join and bring your friends. So I wanted to throw that out there. Keith, you had also mentioned eye rollers, people who run Murphs, run facilities, people who are involved in the infrastructure, and who are thinking, my gosh, this sounds hard. And right now we are well into our Q&A period. We have 24 minutes left for that. And I would encourage those eye rollers to start typing in your questions, because if you have thoughts of, gosh, here's something I think you might want to think about, or did you consider this, we want to talk about that. So anybody out there, if you have a positive comment, hey, that's great too. We'll take it all. But in our honest approach, we want to be sure that we're not missing something, and I'm sure you have something to add. And if you type something, it'll shut me up. So, looks like a couple of people were game for that, which is fantastic. I appreciate it. And it looks like we've got one from Rumpke. Using the success model with the Carton Council's financial and technical support with Murphs, do you see a similar model coming from a packaging industry to provide equipment to divert packaging materials? And you did mention equipment as a potential barrier. What do you think, Keith?
Yeah, well, I think we're still trying to figure out the group is trying to figure out exactly what is needed where. I think the Carton Council model, Carton Council's model has been successful in that it started first with the Murph and worked backwards. And I think the group is similar in that intent, that starting with where are the biggest hurdles. I don't think the group has lined up exactly with when we get to the physical, actual barriers, the things that will need that equipment. We haven't quite addressed how far we're going to go. We're still in the learning phases. But I've definitely captured your notes for the members. Yeah, question.
Okay, fair enough. Another one just coming in. On a domestic perspective, can clear guidelines be summarized for acceptable products for reclamation? Something we could all focus on for starting points to improve what we collect, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think what you're asking here, so from a local government perspective, how do I know what's good to go? How do I know when I'm able to work? And that's exactly right. So I would say that if we did that now, we wouldn't know the answers. We're getting the answers, so we'll be able to do that. And the approach for doing that is back to the systems approach that we can work on. Is if we begin to work with the Murphs to markets, or what are their problems, then definitely the next step after that is then working with those Murph systems, our key Murphs across the country, to say, which city is ready to change, who's upgrading, who's expanding to carts, what's happening now. Is now the time to say these materials, and to really have them on board with a couple parallel paths of operations. There are definitely going to be ones that will enjoy maybe the most easiest path towards recovery, and the ones that will have the hardest one. So once we get those answered, then working with the Murphs to back that down. There has been discussion about some sort of when do we begin to engage in real consumer or recycling coordinator outreach to make sure they know what and when and how. Hopefully by the end of this year, these webinars will begin to be some of those, that we can say in these regions we're having the best luck with these type of materials. The important thing to remember is that this is a national project, but it needs tight, tiny solutions. Solutions that are accurate to each town that's out there. And that requires a good relationship with our Murph partners to help us engage through that. It also means that We need to communicate with our recycling coordinator public and let them know when the trends are starting to shift, when we see easy recoverability on the horizon.
Okay, well that sounds good. And I see that we have a lot more questions rolling in the door, and I got to assume that it's because people don't want to hear me begging for questions. I do have a voice for silent movies, and so that's fair. And we've been talking a lot about some traditional recycling markets. So here's one. How much engagement have you had with commercial composters? Do you envision a level of interaction with that sector as robust as what you will pursue with those Murphs?
Yeah, so definitely, as I said in the presentation, where is composting on this? Well, right now we're starting with the biggest hurdle being the Murph-based recovery. That's not, but the FPI staff team still working to engage with the composter one. And I can't project too far into the future of how the members will choose to move forward, but there's a steady and dedicated interest in making sure we address the composting outlets as well as the Murph-based recycling and energy one.
Okay. We've got a pretty good and long one here.
Okay.
And it's detailed and exciting, and let's check it out. Current market and voluntary efforts are failing. Only 12% of plastic packaging is recovered for recycling. This is abysmal. Two things will assist food packaging recovery. Number one, design for recycling and composting in mind. And number two, producer responsibility laws. What are FPI members doing to design for composting in mind? And why doesn't FPI promote producer responsibility, which is a better market-based tool? So there's a pretty in-depth question.
So I think that this is an example of producer responsibility. This is a group that's engaged immediately right now and has contracted a consulting team that's dedicated to having their back to the recovery market and making sure that this is a legitimate and thoughtful operation. So I think, do I wish it was larger scale? Yes. Do the members wish it was larger scale? Yes. How do they get larger scale? More people on board to do it. But this is an active example of producer responsibility. So that's one. And then the other part of the question, Jason, was about design for recyclability?
That's correct, yeah.
Yep. So I would, this project, again, with limited scope and funds, is focused on recovery. But design for recyclability is definitely always important, and we look to our partners at APR and at SPC for their guidance in making sure, and others, making sure that we, that we do keep design for recyclability and compostability in mind. I think one of the persons registered for this meeting was Ann Bedarf with SPC, and she and I are in pretty regular conversation to make sure these projects, that their work that tends to focus more on design lines up with this work that lines up or focus more on recovery.
Okay, look, that's good. That's a good insight on a tough question, Keith. I appreciate that. We've got another one out on plastics. What happens when PLA-based food packaging starts entering Murphs more than it already does?
I think when PLA is sortable, NatureWorks has recently released bale specs and pricing and is active in the marketplace saying they'd like to buy bales back. So if it's sortable and there's an end market, then there's a connection there.
Okay, no, good for me. So how about this one? If 70% of food service packaging is taken out of the store, as you said, the customer leaves with it, what is the plan for recovering packaging from consumers? Okay, so good point. It makes me want to click back to one of our graphics. So hang with me while I zoom back to slide 10, and here we have it. So 70% walked out the door, and that's what we kind of see here in this little visual that happens here. 70% walks out the door, but what do we know next is that 50% of it ends up at the home and business. Now, the compostable part is more connected to in-store operations, but the part that leaves and ends up in the home and business, that's where we're able to connect with that Murph-based recovery infrastructure. The
same carts that pick up your bottles and cans and newspapers. The hope is that they can expand to include more cups, cans, boxes, and bags, and give them that access. And that is why we're really focusing on solving the Murphs market problem first.
Okay. Okay, so I'm scrolling through. We've got so many questions. I want to just be sure we don't cover questions that are similar, and a few similar ones are rolling in. So, here's one kind of about approach, and I would say realism. It seems like, despite your research and the stakeholders you contacted when you spoke to your friend, Keith, about contamination, it seems that you were despondent, perhaps. It didn't feel like you ended your project with that same positive outlook that you began. And anybody who knows Keith knows that she is realistic but positive. Can you address some of the successes when working with Murphs? What's gone well?
Oh, no, I wasn't despondent. I mean, it would be easy to walk in and say, where's that low-hanging fruit, and have none, but that's the point, right? So if they say none, then we start piece by piece. You pick up the cup and you say, well, what are your concerns here? And it really starts with, what is the material? I don't even know what that cup is. Which bale does it fit in? How does it affect how does it flow through my Murph? How does it affect my bale? Who's buying that again? A lot of it was confusion. No, that was a perfectly excellent exercise in reality, and I think has really steered the rest of the project in making sure that it goes directly to the point. So, Jason, I got a question that came in to me directly, and it was pointing out my map of end markets that were there. It seems like maybe the Raleigh Waste Management PERF, a plastics recovery facility specific for post-market separation, wasn't on. There was a dot missing there. That facility is accepting, is processing a 337, but again, it's acting more as a Murph. So they're accepting bales, not a reprocessor, meaning a remanufacturer spinning or turning those non-bottle material into its next life. So just to clarify that one.
Okay, fair enough. That's a good clarification, and I think helpful for our folks out there, especially the folks out there in that region. How about this? We do keep popping back and forth between, really between all the recovery options. And these composting ones do keep popping up. Are you aware of the anaerobic composting efforts that are out there? As an example, UW-Oshkosh might be a partner if they have some test protocols, which is hey, there's a positive market right there, right? That was a good comment. What do you think? Yeah,
again, I definitely have looked at anaerobic digestion as an outlet for organic-based material, and we'll make a note of that at the end as a possible connection there. Right now, the key focus for the primary part of the project is that Murph to market, but we'll connect with the FPI staff who are engaged on the composting side and make sure that's there.
Okay. So here is kind of a percentage question. I was never so good at these. It was kind of like the driving questions where if you're going from point A to point B and you have half a tank of gas, I always get confused. But the question is, and maybe Keith, you can help me out, is that 50% of the 70% which leaves the facility, or 50% of the total?
Oh, okay. I would have to double check and make sure. Not that if you want to pipe in and help me with this, but I think the answer is that 70% of that leaves, and of that leaves is 50 or 50 of the total. Can you help me with that one, Natha?
It's 70% of the total. 50% of the total. I'm sorry.
Over the overall generation total. Thank you. Okay. Say that again. 70% of the total amount that leaves or is generated. 70% leaves the venue. Of the amount that's generated, 50% of that hits the home and business by FPI's research.
So we're saying that half of it ends up in the home out of all that's generated.
Home and place of work.
And place of work.
Correct.
That is a good clarification. I normally get lost somewhere around Albuquerque, and I followed that. So you guys did great. So I'm trolling around to see if there's any new ones that we have missed. And does establishing a bale spec and offering a price translate into recyclability?
Let's see. Does So this goes back to the question about PLA and NatureWorks. Well, I guess you need to start somewhere, right? And if you are interested in recovering a material, then you better define what it is, which is a bale spec. And since this is not, this is a market, this is a business operation, I guess you better pay someone. But recyclability, and then how do you define recyclability? Can you take something, grind, melt, reproduce it into something else? That's that. But I think if the question is there a broad recovery market for that material alone? No, not yet. It does not have the quantity in the marketplace or all the recovery potential out there yet. But again, if you're going to try and make something recyclable, you better tell it what it is, what you'll pay for it, and that you can turn it back into resin to go back into a container. And I think that's what they have in place.
Excellent. And I'd like to point out, we probably have room for a couple more questions. I have a couple more to hit, honestly, but we could probably squeeze in one or two more beyond that. So if you're sitting out there thinking, oh, they'll not get to me, we are looking for you. We do have a few more to go. We still have 9 minutes left, and that's some valuable time. So please hit your question if you have one. And if you've sent in 5 already, then maybe feel free to let somebody else kick one in. That's okay too. But all that being said, here's a good one. We've been talking about these percentages, the 70s and the 30s and the 50s. Please confirm that collection implementation in restaurant has not yet been addressed by this project. And are there plans to address in-restaurant collection?
Well, I think, go back to those logos that we saw at the beginning of who's in here. And it's a lot of restaurant operators. And what do they want? They want nothing more than front of store first. But what they understand is that if you start front of store, you have a higher contamination concern, and you don't have volume. You have not hit your critical mass. So if we go back to 50% of what's generated hits the home of point of business, that's the bulk of material. So that's why we chose to start there, so we can work on that problem-solving approach of getting that material to a Murph, through a Murph, and into its end markets, whether it's recycling or energy recovery, but really working with those end markets to connect that. Once we have that flow of material in place, then we get to the golden land, and that is really how do we then come back to that front of store. So has it been addressed? I would say yes, it has. That's definitely the where we're headed, just trying to solve that critical mass problem first.
Thank you, Keith. We got another, this is just more of a comment, really, from Rumpke, who jumped in earlier, basically just saying we had a good dialogue with this group, with Keith's group, and it's important to discuss that.
Yeah, well, you're right. I was wrong to neglect that. So I gave the example from Reed Community, but Rumpke was gracious enough to host the FPI members in a tour of their facility of Columbus, and it was great. The members jumped on that, maxed out how many members could come, and they were very eager in making sure that they understood this Rumpke facility as an example of a recovery infrastructure. I would say that for many of the members, these FBI members, it was not their first time in the Murph, that they work on their own individual projects. And so thanks again for bringing up that I didn't recognize Rumpke enough, because they've been very active in this project. But that does bring up something that I think I didn't quite hit on. Why are all these companies together for this project? From the beginning, they decided that they each have their own individual company approaches to working on recovery, but it's very hard to work on your own. And just like we need critical mass in the recovery, we need critical mass in the activity. We need to do more partnership within ourselves. So this group was formed because of that very reason.
Okay, thank you, Keith. And keeping an eye on the clock, we probably have time to kick through a couple more. And here's a great one. Have the pilots been implemented in any test markets? And if so, how successful was the in-outlet collection?
So when it says in-outlet collection, I assume that means the in-store collection. So again, really spent the first year understanding all the information we could about what kind of material it was, how many units, how much tonnage, where does it go, what are our markets, how does that behave, and then starting in the Columbus with Rumpke and Charlotte with re-community areas to test what we thought would be the hurdles we'd need to overcome to recover that. So I wouldn't say they're pilots so much as strong relationships with those Murph and community partners, and really making sure that the FCI project understands thoroughly what they need to know there. So I think, is that all right, Jason?
No, that's exactly what that's enough to keep me hopping. Tell you what, there was a follow-up question that came in on the PLA question. It's how do we keep any food packaging PLA from causing big trouble with PET and other plastics recycling? And I think this probably goes to the broader thing of we've got some diverse materials and how do we handle them and sort them, right? I mean, that's kind of where that's going. Yeah, well, I think this is a good question in the marketplace. I'm not sure that I'm certain I'm not able to answer that. I think I would need to look to our friends at NatureWorks and at Association of Post-Consumer Plastics Recyclers to help us with this one. Okay, no, that's fair, and I like the realism again, and I also like the thoroughness of thinking, here's who we can go to and work with. So that's very helpful. Okay, and I think we've got time for one last one that I feel good about getting through. So how about this? Does FPI envision a depth of involvement similar to the Carton Council in actively solving market, processing, and collection issues with sizable capital and technical assistance investments? Well, yeah, what comes with all that? Budget, right? Funding. And I think what's similar in these two projects is intent, and what's dissimilar in these two projects is probably stated funding. Not that, this seems like one that you should probably take on. Did I handle that or answer that fairly for you from your point of view?
Yes, it's about funding and the intent of the groups, the Paper Recovery Alliance and the Plastics Recovery Group, to not subsidize the market, but to work within the realistic frames of the market as it exists. Okay, well, that's I think that's a kind of a great ending point for this first one. Though with exactly a minute and a half left to go, Natha, did you have any last things you wanted to say to the fine folks who've tuned in for us? Just thank you, first of all, and second of all, for anyone who's wondering why in the world RRS is involved in this project, FPI has hired Resource Recycling Systems as our primary consultant for the Plastics Recovery Group and the Paper Recovery Alliance to really be the experts and help guide us through this journey. Thank you. And Keith, would you like to follow up on that or give any closing comments yourself? No, I would just like to say that this is not an easy road. There's no reason to gloss over any of this. But everyone I've talked to about this thus far has been helpful, and I welcome more. Okay, excellent. No, I think that's a solid endpoint. So for me, I'd like to thank Keith and Natha. Thank all the people who participated, who sent in questions, who listened and learned. This is the very beginning of our efforts here to pull more people in, involve people, and work together. And so please do contact Keith or Natha if you want to be involved, if you want more information. We would love to have it. So with that, look for an email from us soon telling you where you can find this if you want to go and check it out again. And also in the months to come, look for more webinars and more information and more success stories and exciting ideas. So again, thanks a lot. Have a great weekend, everybody, and take care.